Gear Raid 2 Stage 21 is finally down. I finally cleared it. I managed to beat it by merging my existing strategies I've been working on for a while with a couple of things I've been seeing popping up in other people's videos. In the description of this video, I will be leaving links to all of the other YouTube videos I've seen on Gear Raid 2-21, as there are a number of different strategies. Some of them I can't do myself. But the general gist of it, there's three that I'm aware of, three major strategies. And by the way, these will be viable through 19 to 21. All of these stages are functionally the same. It's just the stats of the enemies are much higher. The damage output of the boss and the adds are also a lot higher. And the damage you need to deal to kill the adds is significantly higher as well. So the first one, and my favorite one, is the one I use on my auto run. I will just auto this now and I'll explain it to you quickly. And then I will run manually without Power of Dominance to show you the strategy I used to clear it the first time. This strategy is my preferred strategy. It worked for me for stages 19 and 20. However, this strategy does not work for me in stage 21 without Power of Dominance, though it does for someone I know. So you can definitely use this without Power of Dominance. You just need to have an insanely powerful team, and I don't have that much at the moment. You probably need some Awakenings and maybe some better gear than I have. So the general premise is you place down Dalin so that you can get the cost point generation. You have Salazar down tanking. He needs to have a load of HP for this. I had to re-gear him a bit, and I actually had to re-gear my Eloin to make her attack speed high enough that I could heal between the attacks twice. Because if he is not full HP, he gets completely destroyed by these adds. So I found that very tricky to make sure that his HP was high enough. At the moment, his tanking needs a lot better because Power of Dominance is on. With Power of Dominance off, you can't even see his HP when he gets hit once. So he needs to be fully topped off, which means Eloin needs to hit him twice with heals. So you need to build her with some attack speed to make that work. Then when the two arrive, he kills them both with his ult. I place down my Regulus and I place down Brokir. Now you don't need to use Brokir. I've just pulled him today and I think he's fantastic. But normally I would use Olag in his stead. The reason I'm using Brokir is because he has a talent which grants damage reduction to adjacent allies by 10%, increasing by another 30% when he is frozen, which can be done by his ultimate or when his iceberg passive triggers upon taking fatal damage. So very powerful for that kind of stuff, but again, you don't need to use him. You could use Baron, you could use Olag. I prefer to use Olag normally, but Brokir is now my number one for this position because he reduces damage taken by adjacent allies. Normally this is not a problem. In stages 19 and 20 I've not had any issue with the middle part taking damage, and the middle part being these two. I'll just quickly explain what happened there. They're tanky enough by themselves, and I was relying on just Regulus's ult to absorb some of the damage from the guys in the middle, and that kept them alive. But in stage 21 the damage is so high that they were just getting smashed. So having Brokir to also mitigate the damage they take, stacking with Regulus's ult was just the last piece I needed to keep them alive in the middle. So just quickly explain what happened. Dalin just generated some more cost. I despawned her. I placed Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn has a special artifact, which I'll put an image of up here somewhere, which grants you a percentage of your rage immediately upon deployment, which means you can ult with her as soon as you place her. So as per my previous videos, I need to wait just a fraction of a second so that she hits herself with a shield, and then she ults, because then it's her shield plus 90% from her ult, which means she'll survive the 200% damage from the Shriek, which is 200% at stages 20 to 21. So the shield goes up, it gets hit, massive damage comes out. Brokir actually pops his fatal because the damage, annoyingly, super annoyingly, the damage the Shriek does is actually percentage health based. You can see Golem Shriek is 200% of your max HP for stages 20 and 21, for 19 is 150%. So my Brokir has over 100,000 HP, my Gwendolyn has around 50,000, maybe near 60,000. So as you saw, the shield was actually quite small on him, and 200% of his HP just crushed that shield and would have killed him. His passive Iceberg popped and now he is immune to damage. It's not too bad for Earthshake because it's reducing damage, but unfortunately the timing didn't quite line up. So anyway, his Iceberg has now been popped. Immediately after Shriek, the boss will be using Earthshake. 3 consecutive high physical damage strikes to all targets 3 times, so 9 instances of damage in total. And this is really, really, really heavy hitting, and especially in stage 21, you need a massive amount of damage mitigation to survive this, or just an incredible amount of healing, or not to be there is a strategy that I'll show you after this. I use Regulus's ult because it basically absorbs 40% of the damage taken, and that reduces it. I time it with Eloin's ult to heal everyone around her, and I place her Wood Elf. After surviving the Earthshake, now we have loads of adds coming in, so I drop my Vierna. Vierna is key for me in this. You can do other things. I've seen people using 2 mages, one on either side, such as a Karma and a Nocturne, because they have very high damage. You can also place someone across here like a Zillatu, an Arrogance. You can have Salazar sitting in here and bursting with his ult. There's a few different options for killing these off, but it is a very tricky part to survive. You need to kill them pretty fast. So my strategy is this: 6 of them come in total. I wait until they're just about to lip over into Fiona's range, and then I ult and wipe them all out. Now, this is another part where this strategy does not work with Power of Dominance off. My Fiona does not do enough damage to instantly kill them. They did for stages 19 and for stage 20, and it did not for stage 21. So again, this is my preferred strategy, this is my fastest team, but it doesn't work on stage 21 without Power of Dominance. Shriek comes up again, so a second ult from Gwendolyn damages too much for my Broke here because, again, his HP is so high, and he dies. He doesn't have Iceberg anymore. So he dies, I drop down Olag. Olag is insane. We have the boss's Earthshakes up now. Once again, though, we have Regulus with his passive available, and we have Eloin's Wood Elf down and Eloin's ultimate up. So we have plenty of healing and absorption going on. We don't have Brokir's damage mitigation this time, so all of the damage is going straight into the middle. So I do need to have this up pretty sharp. Olag is getting punched up a bit, but he is pretty tanky. And because my Fiona is still on cooldown to place, instead, I drop down Volker and Salazar in the middle to help deal with these. Salazar just about survives, ults and kills a few. Volker dies, but she absorbs some damage. And I'm just about hanging on. You can see there's a lot of damage coming out. Fiona kills, Fiona is despawned, and then I do despawn my Olag. The reason I despawned Olag, because if I didn't despawn him, then for this Golem Shriek that's just about to land, Gwendolyn's ult, which is 100% required for me, would not be cast on herself and thus our adjacent allies. It would actually be cast on the last placed hero, and it would be cast over here on Olag, unless her health is lower than his, which is potential, but it's not always going to be the case. So I prefer to do this, despawning Olag, and then ensuring that the shield is going to be cast here and keeping everyone alive. So that happens, and now we have one final wave to deal with, and Brokir is back up. Once again, we have another Earthshake, so we have another ult from Regulus, we have another Wood Elf, and we have another ult from Eloin. But this time we have Brokir down, so he is applying some damage mitigation to adjacent allies. And then it's pretty standard. We need to mop up these two on the right, so despawn him, quickly drop down Dalin, because once the boulders roll into you, they take a percentage of their health as damage. They die murdering Dalin, but both of the golems are now wiped out. So that's a pretty good result on the right side. And now on the left, we just have to deal with these. Volker goes down because she hits 3 targets with every auto attack, so she's actually quite good at dealing with this part. I despawn her after ulting, and then I drop down my Salazar. And Brokir is more than tanky enough to handle this. Fiona goes down just for some burst damage. Salazar ult, and it is over. So this is my current strategy. This is my favoured strategy. But again, this will not work without Power of Dominance, at least for me. It does work for one player I know, so you can do something like this, though the Fiona part will not quite work as cleanly as you might hope, simply because Fiona will not be able to do enough damage to wipe all of the adds out in time. So I just wanted to very quickly skim over how my preferred strategy is. Again, that will work on stages 19 and 20, very hard on gearing, very tight on placements. Some things that you need to keep in mind if you're doing that strategy, which I like to think of as the tanking strategy. That is the only strategy I'm aware of where you're actually absorbing the encounter and actually facing it head on. Gwendolyn was key for me in this one, but if you had a King Haas and a Vortex built up, you could probably do it with a different way of shielding, but the shielding absorption is very important, especially for the Shrieks. Bear in mind, Olag's shielding is so high, he can actually survive the Shrieks without a Gwendolyn. But you can also rotate defenders if you don't have a Gwendolyn. So for Gwendolyn, I mentioned you needed an artifact to get her to ult in time at the start, and it is the Spirit Horn. It's a legendary artifact. I have it pushed up this far in Awakening, but that was just for the second strategy, which I'll show you shortly. This gives you initial rage. You don't need to upgrade it this much. The second thing is Eloin is going to be tanking a lot of shots from the flying boulders, so you do need to have pretty good health on her, and I recommend the Guardian set because it reduces the damage she takes. Additionally, you want to pick up some attack speed. 64 is cutting it pretty fine. Any less than this, especially in stage 21, and your Salazar, your Wrath, whoever you're going to be using a tank, is not going to be able to get healed enough in time between the attacks, and they will get flattened. Other than that, for the defenders I used on this run, my Brokir was built with just pure HP in mind. This is kind of just leftover gear. It is not fantastic gear, as you can see. There's practically no purples in this stuff other than random stats. You can see he's got 92% healing effect, which he's not using. The Asclepius set is just because it grants him max HP. I've just pumped as much HP as possible, and in total I'll be hitting just over 100k health, which again is not ideal for Gwendolyn's shielding, but it's fine because he can just survive so long generally anyway. And he has, of course, his Iceberg passive to keep him alive for 1 fatal attack per deployment. For the other key defenders, my Regulus, I actually run him half naked just because I need his HP to be low enough that 200% of his health isn't more than 100% of his health plus 90% of Gwendolyn's health. So Gwendolyn's health has to be much higher than his. This is just because I don't want his passive being popped unnecessarily, as unfortunately Lionheart pops when Regulus's HP drops below 10%, not when he takes fatal damage, which I find incredibly frustrating to play around. I wanted to preserve his Lionheart as long as possible. I didn't want it getting wasted during the first Earth Shake, which is quite common, or even in the first Shriek. And also, if it is getting popped by Shriek because his health is too high, then Gwendolyn can't save him at all and he will eventually die to Shriek. So you do definitely need to keep his health below a certain threshold if you're relying on shielding to keep him up. Olag is just a complete beast, so I've got him on near 80,000 health. And this is because he applies his own shields to himself. Every 11 seconds, he's generating a shield equal to 85% of his max HP. So he only needs a tiny bit more, 15% more shield from Gwendolyn, and he's okay to survive the Shrieks. In fact, he can even survive the Shrieks by himself, as I believe these shields can stack. So Olag is just insanely good for this. As for Baron, I don't use him to tank the general Shrieks. I only use him in certain phases. And because of that, I never bothered keeping his health below a certain threshold, but again, he does have an unyielding phase, which is very useful, but unless you're using him in place of Regulus like I am to tank Shrieks, then his HP doesn't matter. As for the rest of the damage, Salazar needs to be slightly tanky enough so that he doesn't get one shot in stage 21. For 19 and 20, the requirement is not so high. I've actually got mine on a broken set. He previously was on a Night Terror set, which is my preference for him, but I put him on a broken set just so I could increase his stats a bit more. He needed a bit more HP, and it allowed me to get items that had some more HP substats on them. And lastly, for this strategy, my Vienna kind of just high damage focus. I didn't really bother about making her tanky because it's just not really relevant. She just needs to be able to delete the wave when it arrives. Anyway, this strategy will work very well in stages 19 and 20. If you have those heroes, you can replace a few of them. In 21, like I've said, it will be very hard to make work without Power of Dominance, so I think it is a pretty fast team to run when you do have pod. So I will show you the team that I used to clear stage 21 for the first time now, and this is another strategy. I think of this strategy as the avoidance strategy, avoiding Shrieks and avoiding as many Earth Shakes as possible. That is what this entire strategy revolves around, and for this you don't actually need a Gwendolyn, and it requires a lot less fine timing. I think it's a much better strategy to use for general players, and for it you need a very good Vortex. In my opinion, he seems to be one of the best people to use. So I just kind of strip all of the gear off of my Gwendolyn because I'm not going to be using her for this. So there we have it. I've nicked all of the gear off of Gwendolyn, and one more thing is I need to give him a slightly better artifact. I'll be giving him Eloin's artifact because I'm also not going to be using Eloin. And one of the last things I need to do with gearing is my Dolores needs to ult a lot sooner, so I will be stealing the Spirit Horn off of Gwendolyn as well. Other than that, the rest of my team will be staying as is. So I will show you that strategy now. Gear 2. Power of Dominance will be turned off, and this is the lineup I use for the avoidance strategy. The premise is pretty simple. You do not want to be down when a single Shriek hits. You don't want to be there at all, and ideally you want to dodge as much of the Earth Shakes as possible. This strategy I think is a much safer and more viable strategy. I find it much slower, which is the reason I don't use it in my auto runs. It's probably a much safer and easier strategy to adopt for players as well if you're not quite built up yet. So Aatrox you can see is here. That is just because I didn't save a Decimus. I would definitely recommend using Decimus, the rare version, instead of Aatrox because Decimus has a survival state. The reason to use these two: one, Decimus has an invulnerability window where he stays as a ghost, which can block the rolling boulders for a time, but the main reason is they have a very short respawn time and a very low cost. The reason I have Isolde is she can also block boulders, but mainly because she is a North faction lord and I have a bunch of North heroes here and I really want to boost them as much as possible, especially my Vortex, who's going to be very key to this strategy. I mentioned in the first part of this video with the tanking strategy that Vienna was unable to kill the waves of enemies because they're just so tanky without Power of Dominance in stage 21. Dolores will allow my Vienna to kill those enemies again, so that's the reason she's here. And the reason I have Volker is because Volker at Awakening 1 reduces ally revival time by 25%. So this helps you rotate your heroes in and out a lot quicker, which is very key to the strategy. Besides that, we have Vortex now as our primary healer instead of Gwendolyn and Eloin, and we have a whole bunch of defenders, and if you notice, 3 of these defenders have invincibility states. Olag is just incredibly tanky. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so first we drop down Olag, and then Vienna goes down, and then Dolores goes down. You can see the Spirit Horn taking effect and boosting Dolores' rage, and almost immediately we can ult. We can just despawn Olag immediately, despawn her. Now we're back to having no one placed. The boss spawns and there's nothing on the map. He will perform his Shriek and it won't matter because we don't have a single person there. So now the main problem is we have an Earthshake coming and we have a rolling boulder. So we place down a Regulus to tank, and he's now entered his invulnerability phase, but he will drop fairly soon, so this won't last too long. But the boulder hits, takes damage. We want to despawn him to get the cost points back, and we can drop down Aatrox. He absorbs the hits and kills both, and now we can drop down Olag, who's an incredible defender, and Baron, and then we throw down a Vortex to cover both of them, and now we have 2 defenders tanking and we have a healer up. Next up we drop down Vierna. We're waiting for her rage to come up on her ultimate, and then we can throw down Dolores so that she has time for her ultimate as well. There needs to be 6 to spawn in total, so we just wait for these guys to come a bit closer, pop an ult on Dolores, fire the ultimate from Vierna, and now I can despawn absolutely everyone again, because remember, this is the avoidance strategy. We don't want to be here. I don't want to see the shriek, I don't want to feel it. So we wait for the boss to finish his shriek. The second shriek has gone, we have more rolling boulders coming in, and we have Regulus back up again. So we can drop Regulus. I'll use Broke here, but you can use someone else. For example, Decimus works very well because again he has a ghost phase for this. The passive gets popped on Regulus, which does say on the tooltip that it is per battle, but it seems to be per deploy. There is no statement on Broke's tooltip, but again it does seem to be per deploy. So the boulders hit, that's run out, that's run out. We drop down, we wait for them to roll, then we drop them down. The boulders hit, all 4 are dead. We lose Aatrox, but he's served his purpose more than well enough. Olag pops back up. We can throw down my Vortex, but we won't cover on the right side. The damage is so high that we're going to rely purely on Baron, who will spawn in a second to survive that. So we'll get rid of this to get the cost points back. We'll throw down a Baron, and so far so good. The main thing is there's going to be a load of these boulders coming in. There are 4 of these adds now, and they're all going to be aiming at Vortex. He's going to be taking a pounding, so we don't want him splitting healing onto someone like Baron. We want him healing just himself and Olag at a pinch. So we can throw down Alvierna. Baron is about to have his passive popped again. Dolores goes down, and now we just need to hope that the adds make it into the middle while everyone else is still tanking. Shield up here. Dolores' ult is now ready, so we fire the ult, we fire the ult from Vierna, everything is crushed, and we just need to despawn everything again rapidly, because once again we are avoiding the shriek. So this is the 3rd shriek hitting right now, and now we need to deal with a final phase of adds, the final wave of adds, and an Earthshake coming up. So once again we have Broke here and Regulus back up, so we'll kind of repeat what we did for the second wave. Just want to skip this to make sure that I last long enough that I don't break at the wrong point. So there we go, their invulnerabilities are back up now, and I need to make sure. So come on, start rolling. There we go. Okay, wonderful. So that is a whole bunch of adds dealt with. Now we just have the boss left. This is quite a tricky part, and I find it very hard to maintain, especially with only one healer. There is another strategy I saw where they use Eloin as well, but I like to have Isolde just so I have another person to place in the lanes to block damage, and as well as being a North faction lord. Some of the benefits are quite nice there. So I need to hold this off, but as you can see, I'm kind of pinched and I don't have a great deal of cost. So I've got 2.5 seconds, I have my Olag spawning, and that's kind of what I'm going to be counting on here. So Olag goes down, Vortex goes down, and I just desperately need those 2 to hang on. So unfortunately, my Oleg did not get his shield up in time and instead dropped. So I'm just going to be waiting out to rotate my tanks around. The boss will just repeatedly slam the ground at this stage, and you just need to hang on as long as you can until he stops. And when he starts moving again, I can place another defender. The first time I did this, it was okay. Olag just tanked it, and eventually the boss stopped doing it. But as it is, I'm probably going to have to wait. The good news is, while it's just the boss and Vortex can heal himself fine because of his overshielding, and the boss starts moving, so we can drop down Broke here to tank. We can drop down Dolores to help out. Vierna here. I do actually prefer having Olag to tank over Broke here, but this is fine for the moment as well. Let's see, if I place Volker behind, sometimes you do get clouted for being in the wrong position, but not in this case. This allows me to have a couple of DPS down, and honestly this takes ages. The first time I did this, it took me 10 minutes in this state to kill the boss. But as you can see, it will work eventually. It will just take a very long time. So this is pretty much the avoidance strategy. This is the one that worked for me. As you can see, it's fairly simple. You just duck every single shriek, and you duck half of the Earthshakes for the entire fight. You use heroes with the unyielding state such as Baron, Regulus, and the new Broke here. Also, Decimus, the rare hero, is quite usable here as well. Aside from that, Olag is fantastic for being a general tank. So those are the core heroes you need for it. Vierna is very key in this version of the strategy because I am using Dolores with Vierna to one-shot the waves, but there are different ways of doing it. Hatsut is another key hero you see people using, and I've seen other people using, I believe, Nocturne with Karmet as a way of getting the damage required out. That pretty much covers the avoidance strategy. I'm going to vanish and fast forward through the rest of this now. So finally we are coming to the end of this run. It's taken a very long time. I most likely edited a chunk of it out because of how long this takes, but the goal here is not to kill it in record time, it is to get the power of dominance, to get the first time clearance, which means you can run a much faster strategy afterwards. So that's that covered. This is my attempt at an avoidance strategy. There are definitely some other ones which are probably a bit cleaner and a bit faster. However, this is the one that worked for me to get stage 21 cleared. So that pretty much covers the two primary ways of clearing Gear Raid 2 stage 21. These are the dominant strategies to be used across all three stages. Definitely try them out, try some variations. Again, it is very recommended to use heroes with an invincibility state. Just to show you, this is Decimus, the hero I don't have at the moment because I probably followed him away from gems. And you can see when he drops to 0 HP, he remains alive and continues to fight for 6 seconds. And it increases by 2 seconds up to 8 seconds in total. So really good hero to use for Gear Raid 2 as well. If we take a look at my server's Gear Raid 2 stage 21 lineups, we can see here that Whisper is using the first strategy, which I refer to as the tanking strategy. He's using Gwendolyn to absorb, also with the Spirit Horn, Eloin to heal, Dallin to help produce enough cost points, Olag to tank, Regulus to tank on the other side, as well as to reduce damage on the center column, and then the rest of these here are for killing the enemies fast enough. You can see this is not using Vierna, because on stage 21, Vierna just doesn't have enough damage without a Dolores. You can see Ray Panassis here is using a avoidance strategy where he has a whole bunch of different tanky defenders. He despawns them at a certain point and has Hatsut absolutely blast them. Big Baby is also using the same strategy, Hatsut to destroy the enemies and a bunch of heroes to rotate in and out. In fact, I don't even think there's a single healer in here. The Hatsut strategy can be incredibly effective, though I think it requires impeccable timing. It's quite tricky to get it right. I actually really prefer the strategy we were just using with Vierna to just eliminate all of the enemies at once. ZWVV is using the same strategy that I did, that we just went over now, but we're using a Decimus and having a Midan as a second healer. So there's a bunch of different variations on similar strategies. There are pretty much two core strategies with a couple of variations. The first one is defending and tanking the Shrieks, as well as tanking the Earthshakes, keeping two defenders alive, Gwendolyn and Eloin. So this one really relies around having Gwendolyn, which is of course a limited hero you can't get anymore, unfortunately. And the second strategy is avoiding the Shrieks altogether, using rotating in a bunch of defenders with invulnerability windows, exploiting the undying phases, and using a massive AoE nuker such as Hatsut, or using Dolores paired with Vierna to kill the mobs fast enough. I think these are probably some of the safest and best strategies around currently. Once you have Power of Dominance, you can kind of turn it down and have a smoother run. Again, you don't need to be that extreme in stages 19 and 20. You can kind of be a bit more relaxed with it. The strategy that I'm using in my auto runs, the first video you saw, I think is a much cleaner strategy that I really quite like, and it's the one I'll probably be continuing to use to farm. And this should work on stages 19 and 20, at least it did for me. So I hope this video helped you guys out. If you have any questions, let me know. I think it's very worthwhile farming Gear Raid 2, especially with the recent gear sets that have been added. Thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great one. Take care and bye-bye.